Now, the last in our series on the end of AIDS. Last night, we looked at the severe epidemic in the city of Miami, Florida. But as William Brangham and producer Jason Kane report, the rest of Florida is struggling too. In the American South, stigma, poverty, and lack of health care drive HIV rates higher than anywhere else in the country. This series was supported by the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting.
HIV thrives in places like this. While the Florida Keys are a tourist mecca, its sprawling distances and small towns make it a hard place to contain a virus.
I think we went through your labs when you were here last.
Some patients, like Jason Barth, do seek out life-saving HIV care, which is now proven to prevent transmission of the virus to others. But Dr. Jerry Jackson says many don't come, and so new cases keep popping up in the Keys.
We should have 0, but instead, last year I think we had 22 in our small little town.
Locals here joke that heading north in Florida takes you straight into the deep south. That includes a place known as America's sweetest town, Clewiston, Florida, home of the sugar company U.S. Sugar.
Yes, I was the first male cheerleader here in Clewiston.
You were so cute.
And home to Timothy Tad Dean.
Do you remember any of the cheers from those days?
I do, but I'm not doing them.
I don't blame you.
Almost 8,000 people live in Clewiston on the banks of Lake Okeechobee, and Dean jokes that every single one of them knows his name, they know his family.
Hi, lovies. How are you?
And they know that he's gay.
Everybody in this town knows who I am.
Is that right?
Everybody in this town knows.
You mean the guy at the
who I
gas
am.
station?
The gas station.
The taqueria?
The police department, the sheriff's department. I mean, Goodwill. I mean, everybody knows who I am. And everybody should know my story by now.
That's partly why, 15 years ago, Dean was devastated to learn he was HIV positive. He was scared of the virus, yes, but more so by the prejudice and myths people have about those living with HIV.
You can't touch their hand, you can't do anything with them because they're infecting everything. You didn't want to go to the theater with them because that seat is now infected. Or don't go to the restaurant that he just went from. So, I mean, it was sad.
Public health officials say these prejudices and fears conspire with poverty and lack of health care to keep America's HIV epidemic alive and well in the South. It's estimated that more than half of all undiagnosed HIV cases are in the southern U.S. More than half of all new diagnoses occur in the South. Including D.C., 8 of the top 10 states with the highest new diagnoses are here as well. And Timothy Dean says people just don't want to talk about it.
It's not out there. The messages are not on the billboards. They're not on the bus stops. There's no message here.
After 5 years of silence, Dean decided to, as he puts it, live positive, tattooing the words on his arm and speaking out publicly.
Woke up one morning, I'm like, dude, I gotta do something. You know, there are kids out there who are putting themselves in danger, putting themselves at risk. So how can I use this as my platform? 4 columns for 4 girls.
Today, Dean works 2 jobs.
Shoulders,
He coaches young women in
feet,
poise and
back.
technique for beauty pageants.
Step off.
And for his day job, he also coaches newly diagnosed
Perfect.
HIV-positive people at the local Department of Health. We weren't allowed to film there, and none of his clients were open to talking with us. Still too much fear, Dean says.
They're afraid they're not gonna be loved. They're not gonna be cared for by their families and their friends. They're scared their friends are gonna leave. A lot of people here that are positive don't even come to care here. They'll go out of town.
This fear has some very real consequences. Studies show that stigma and prejudice around HIV can lead to higher risk behavior, which can increase the chance of infection, and not taking medication regularly.
What should happen.
John Cohen has covered HIV/AIDS around the world for Science magazine, and he was our partner on this series.
You know, we're also in the Bible Belt. There's a really strong...
People don't think of Florida that way, but
certainly regions we've already seen that aren't that far from Miami, very religious. And that influences the way people respond to the groups who are at risk. Let's take gay men, you know. And so that makes people afraid to simply go get an HIV test because they're worried that somebody at the clinic is going to say, hey, you know, your son came in for a test. What's up here, you know?
Or you sidle up to someone at the pharmacy and they see what you're getting.
Exactly. You don't even want to go get your drugs at your town pharmacies. All of that makes it a really dangerous place in many ways for somebody living with HIV.
You know, it's like we're on a desert island, you know, a deserted island, and unless you are HIV, you have no clue on what we're dealing with.
This woman is HIV positive and lives in north central Florida. She asked we not reveal her identity. We'll call her Susan. She struggled with her meds and making it to the doctor an hour away. But what's hardest, she says, is the silence and the judgment. After Susan found out her status, even her husband said, "Don't tell anyone."
Every visit, the doctor's saying, tell your children. And my husband all the way home arguing, I'm telling you, don't tell them. You'll be sorry because they'll treat you different. They'll be different toward you. And I said no.
Susan eventually did tell her kids, and she later found her way to this support group. It's all HIV positive women, called Let's Talk About It, and it's run by the nonprofit Rural Women's Health Project. It's the only group of its kind for 15 counties. That's a huge swath of north central Florida.
We've come through some things together, some real serious things together.
If you spend time with this group, the first thing you realize is that HIV still hangs over each of them like a scarlet letter.
You tell someone you have cancer and they're so sympathetic with you, but you say you have HIV and that's a whole different ball game.
They think we're either, you know, we're sluts, or we're drug users. You know, when they find out you're HIV, first thing they want to know is, how did you get HIV? What did you do wrong?
They say it's like the U.S. hasn't moved past decades-old misconceptions.
It's still going on. It's 2018, guys. What's the problem? What's the situation? What's the issues? Why is this problem is so deep in the South? Why we're still having this problem? It all goes back to the stigma when people did not know about the disease.
When the women talk about education, they really mean it because they live it.
Robin Louie runs the Rural Women's Health Project. She says even misunderstandings about how HIV is transmitted increases the women's sense of isolation.
If you want an example of stigma, it's women who have to sit down with their family, and those that are living with HIV eat off of a paper plate.
Wait, everyone else has a regular plate.
Everybody else is sitting with a regular plate. They're eating off of a paper plate. That's stigma. We've had women that talk to us about, in their own homes, the rest of the family going in and spraying bleach on the toilet after she has used the bathroom.
In this day and age?
2018.
The women say there's plenty of blame to go around. Lack of education, religious intolerance, racism, even resistance from local health officials. When Angela Preto tried to start an earlier support group at her church, a county health official intervened, telling her not to mention HIV in any of her flyers. No telling what the neighbors might do.
So I had to change the name to the Step Club, like an exercise group. It sounds like, you know, we have to break the stigma, and this is the face of HIV.
And it's a great face.
Thank you.
Marvine Edwards says getting past all of this will mean people like her speaking out and overcoming their own internal stigma. She spent years wondering, why me?
You come to a point in your life when you say, why not me?
Really?
Why not me? You know, that's when you've gotten to the point where you're okay in your own skin. And you got to get to that point where who would care about what other people say or think, because they're going to say and think what they want to anyway. I will not allow what another person think dictate to me, the woman that I am, because I'm bigger than HIV. It lives in my house.
And you decided on the right side.
Back in the Florida Keys, Jason Barth says nearly 2 decades on, he's mostly at peace with his own HIV diagnosis.
I don't want to be defined by it. I don't want that to be the one thing that people define me by.
He's now on top-notch HIV medication, the virus inside undetectable. But Jason still has a lab report he got back in 1996, one that shows how very close he came to death. HIV had destroyed nearly all his immune cells.
Why did you keep this? Most people throw their lab reports out.
A reminder of where I was and how low I was at the time. To keep me appreciating what I have now.
The rural South has struggled responding to its epidemic and has often been less than hospitable to those living with HIV. But Jason Barth is a reminder that no matter how bad things get, circumstances can change. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham in the Florida Keys.